17 years is a prison sentence. These are the words my dad whispered in my ear as he embraced me in a hug for the first time in 17 years. You see, my dad wasn't in prison, but shortly after my parents divorced, he brought lunch up to my school smelling of cigarettes and Axe aftershave and a fire engine red Kango hat, a red shirt and starched blue jeans. He leant down and called me his potato chip, gave me a kiss and a hug, and walked out of my life when I was 10 years old. When I look back at that moment, I don't think I realized it was going to be the last time I saw my dad as a child, or for 17 years for that matter. And to be quite honest, I don't think those were his intentions either, but that is exactly what happened. It was last year, September of 2021, and I got a phone call from an estranged auntie with no idea what she was about to tell me. She said to me, "Jordan, your dad has 5 aneurysms throughout his body, the largest one being in his aorta and the second largest one being in the artery that runs through his groin, and to fix one will compromise the other and vice versa. The doctors need to operate immediately. And when they do, if they cannot shrink the aneurysms, they will have to go straight into open heart surgery. Something he most likely won't wake up from due to his COPD. See, what she was telling me was this, is that if the doctors don't operate, he will die. But even if and when they do operate, he still may very well die. This moment was monumental. I had to decide what I was going to do with this information that I was just given. Was I going to be the one who let him walk out of my life? Or was I going to take back just a little bit of control and make sure that I got to see him one last time for my own healing and my own closure? I chose the latter. And in a whirlwind of 48 hours, my partner and I were on a plane to Charleston, South Carolina, renting a car and driving 5 hours north into North Carolina to see my dad again for the first time in 17 years, and probably for the last time in my life. In those 48 hours, there were a few still moments, and I found myself wondering, how will I feel? Will I laugh? Will I cry? Will I be happy? Will I be sad? Is he going to survive? Is this going to be both a hello and a goodbye? Who am I going to be in this moment? When I first saw my dad, he was standing on the curb in blue plaid pajama flannel pants and a white shirt, a ball cap, and sandals, and he had a belt on around his waist to support his abdomen so that his aneurysms didn't burst, and he had his arms out wide before the car even stopped. When I got out, he embraced me in the tightest hug, and through these choking, wailing sobs of remorse, he whispered in my ear, 17 years is a prison sentence. See, this phrase meant so much. It was an apology in a deep kind of way, filled with remorse and regret. And suddenly, all these questions I had about how I was supposed to feel were answered. And I decided in that single moment that even if my dad couldn't be there for me growing up, I was going to be there for him in his final days. The next 48 hours was filled with preparing for surgery, and as we played that hurry up and wait game that hospitals love to drag people through, the room was filled with nostalgic stories and answers that I had and that were left unanswered as a child, that left my brain reeling in the anxiety of assumptions. There was healing and exchange in perspective and explanation that not only I needed to hear, but that he needed to hear too. The next morning, when the nurses came in and began unhooking his cords and his monitors, erasing his existence from that space, they started to wheel his bed towards the door, and I found myself calling out, "Can I go with him?" Not quite ready to say goodbye because we had just said hello again. His leathery hand, worn from serving this country and years of factory work, gripped mine, and silent tears fell from both of our faces. That walk to pre-op was one of the hardest walks of my life, and I could only begin to imagine to compare it to walking down death row to the execution chamber. I held his hand for the next 2 hours straight, and right before the double doors closed to the operating theater, he held up his left hand and he waved goodbye. Probably this time for good. I only later found out that they don't even let people into pre-op unless they don't think the person's going to make it. I ran down the hallway, through the double doors, down the elevator and into the car where my partner was waiting. I needed to get out of there. The weight of looming death was heavy and suffocating. After hours of sitting in silence, my brain just trying to process everything I had just experienced, the first thing I could manage to say was, what if he lives? And that, my friends, is exactly what happened. The doctors were able to shrink all of his aneurysms in an extremely, unexpectedly successful surgery, and he went home a few days later. And every day after his surgeries, he called me once, twice, 3 times, one day 6 times. And now here we are navigating this new reality, this adult father and daughter relationship, and I have a better understanding of my dad and his behaviors and his childhood, and he has an understanding that his daughter never stopped loving him. Now when the phone rings, I answer and I say, "Hey, Dad, how are ya?" And in his deep, raspy voice, he says, "Hey, potato chip, how you been?"